Hey everybody, this is our last Sunday night youth group before the new year kicks off with 2017. It's hard to believe we're here already, but thank you guys so much for everything that you have done this whole year with 2016, and we are looking forward to a great new year together. But we're not there yet. We have one last Sunday, this Sunday night, where we are wrapping up our Christmas story. And I want to remind you, we have gifts for you this Sunday night, so you want to be at our small group leader meeting. Don't miss out on that because I promise it's going to be worth it. Now, like I said, we're in week 3 of another Christmas story this week, the last of our Christmas series. And for me, it's always difficult to tell an old story in a new way. Once you've heard a familiar story 1,000 times, it really starts to lose some of its punch. A filmmaker will come up with a brilliant way to give an old story new life. And one of those ways is called the origin story. Origin stories are all about telling a character's backstory. Like, how did Batman become who he was? What happened in Superman's early years? These origin stories have become wildly popular for films and music and all sorts of different avenues in culture. It's because they fill in the blanks of what you never knew before. They remind us that there's always another part to the story. When it comes to stories, you can't get much more familiar than the Christmas story. We hear it every year, same time of the year, but a few of us know that there is more to the Christmas story than we might know. There's an origin story inside the Christmas story. And the reason why the origin story matters at Christmas is the same reason why it matters for other stories. Because without that background, we make assumptions. We make assumptions about people all the time. We don't know the whole story. We fill in the blanks with what we think is going on. And if that's true for our relationships with people, it can certainly be true for our relationship with God. Anytime there's a blank in our minds, something we don't understand about God, we're tempted to fill in that blank. Think about it like this. We say, because blank happened, God must be blank. We make assumptions. But here's what I want you to consider. As we observe a part of the Christmas story that's often overlooked this week, I want you to be open to the possibility that your assumptions might be a little bit off and that maybe there's more to the Christmas story and to our story than you thought. Before Mary and Joseph, we meet Elizabeth and Zechariah. They were older and had no children, which was a very big deal back then. In that culture, being unable to have children created a lot of shame. So they did what anyone else in their situation would have done. They prayed a lot. They constantly asked God for a baby, but nothing happened until one day, everything changed. Zechariah went to the temple, which would be kind of like our church, when an angel named Gabriel came to visit him. And check out what happened next. It says this in Scripture. The angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John." And that's Luke chapter 1, verses 11 through 13. Now, I bet he couldn't wait to get home and tell his wife. But the good news doesn't stop there. Gabriel went on to tell Zechariah that his future son, John, would be a great man who would lead many people back to God. Zechariah didn't know it then, but his son would grow up to be John the Baptist. Then Zechariah starts feeling a little doubtful. And look at how he responds, because he starts thinking, my wife is old, I'm old, there's no way this is going to happen. And Zechariah says this. Zechariah asked the angel, "How can this be true? How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years." My first reaction to this is, come on, man, have a little bit of faith. It's an angel telling you this. But the truth is, Zechariah did something that we all have a tendency to do. He assumed something. He looked at his situation, and he drew a conclusion that having a baby was impossible. Zechariah made a huge assumption about God's ability to come through in his life. And it's not that assumptions are always a bad thing. The problem is they're usually wrong. Why? Because we generally make assumptions without knowing the whole story. We're all tempted to assume things about God. And here's the problem with that. A wrong assumption about God can limit your belief in God's ability in your life. But that's not the end of the story for Zechariah. From here, the writer Luke takes a jump and jumps over and tells us about Elizabeth, Elizabeth's cousin, Mary, who eventually became the mother of Jesus. It's almost as if Mary says, let me get things straight. Number one, you're an angel. Number two, I'm going to get pregnant as a virgin. And Mary's saying, this might not be possible. This is crazy. Mary's going to be Jesus' mother, but it doesn't make sense. But I love what the angel says at the end of this passage. For nothing is impossible with God. Mary's response shows us where her real confidence was. Not in her assumptions, but in what was true and real about God. When there was a blank in her space in her mind, she chose to fill it with faith in what God could do. When the angel told Mary that nothing was impossible with God, she believed it. She believed that God could write a story that was beyond anything that she could imagine. And that's one of the things Christmas reminds us. We don't know what God is up to. He has more going on behind the scenes than we realize. I want us to think about it like this week. God's story is greater than your assumptions. This Christmas, I want you to fill in the blanks of your mind with faith, with a belief that nothing is impossible with God. Let's drop the assumptions about ourselves, our circumstances, and what God is capable of doing or willing to do in our lives. And let's decide, even for just this season, to be a part of the amazing story that God's writing. I hope you experience Christmas in a brand new way this year. I hope you pray big prayers. And I hope you remember that God's story is bigger than your assumptions for what your own story could be. With God's help, it can be extraordinary. And so that's the conversation for this Sunday. At 4:45, we will see you for our small group leader huddle. Don't forget, we've got Christmas gifts for you. Promise it'll be worth it. Let's end the year strong with everybody here. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you Sunday. Bye, guys.